You have two roads. One is the road of the despondent cringer. The other is to admit that Azure striker Gunvolt might be the coolest guy of all time. Walk with me and learn why he's just so swag. Be free. From the people who helped with Mighty Number 9 and made Galgun, I am not kidding, comes one of the best 2D action platformers on the 3DS. How did this happen? Well, let's see for ourselves. Gunvolt opens strong, giving us an intro into just the kind of character we're playing as. He's cunning enough to fake getting tortured just to get info from his enemy, and then doesn't even bother striking his captor down as he easily escapes and bolts towards danger. Gunvolt's name is the exact gameplay loop in the exact order it happens. You gun, and then you volt. Tagging things with your gun and then activating your electricity powers is the main way to do damage here, and you can immediately see influence from other games the studio worked on, from the air combos of Pac-Man and the Ghostly Adventures on the 3DS to the tagging of Mighty Number 9. Where does the Galgun influence show up? Trust me, we'll get there. Gunvolt only has a couple moves, but they can all be chained together in interesting ways. Your dash can be chained into a jump, which can be extended by using your electricity, which lets you float farther. During all of this, you can be shooting the gun to tag enemies and do damage as you go. There are more situational moves too, like a wall jump similar to the one in Mega Man X. Wonder if there's any reason for that. As you dash and crash your way through security, you'll jump on a moving train, fighting along the tops of the cars until you finally get into the one holding your target. Expecting to find a server rack, Gunvolt instead finds a young girl plugged into the computer. She's being held prisoner, and her psychic powers are being weaponized by the same organization you came to destroy. Your boss says her powers are too much and to eliminate her. Luckily, we don't do that, and the tutorial level of Gunvolt ends with us saving Jewel and her seeing us as her guardian angel, literally. And what an opening level. You get so much from so little here. Not a ton to chew on thematically, but we already see the pieces being set up for something big. And of course, saving a little friend is always a great motivator. From here on out, Jewel and Gunvolt will support each other, with Gunvolt going freelance bounty hunter to pay the bills, and Jewel supporting Gunvolt with her psychic power, manifested as Lumen. Lumen is basically her own person, and it's her that the company that kidnapped Jewel, Sumeragi Corp., was after. Her song has the power to control or empower those with psychic abilities, and now that Lumen is on our side, we get a second shot at any level if it sufficiently hands us our butt. Because Lumen is her own person, she has a different relationship with Gunvolt. Where Jewel sees Gunvolt as a big brother and protector, Lumen calls Gunvolt bro, hottie, and tells him to come back without a shirt. This is where the Galgun influence was hiding. You may have noticed by now that this game has crafting, upgrades, and a very specific set of design sensibilities. Well, Inti Creates did work on all the games I talked about before, but they may have also made all of the Mega Man Zero games, and Mega Man 9, and Mega Man 10, and Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. They are spiritual successor royalty. For every Galgun they put out, they also bring back a classic platformer with fresh, excellently swag elements, such as the balance of the world. Gunvolt is their biggest original platformer, and for good reason. I got through 3 of the proper levels, and each one had its own unique mechanic that tested my precision, timing, and combat ability. These magnetic platforms are a great introduction to that idea. They start simple, but eventually combine with other stage elements to slowly ramp up the challenge. And the bosses! Each one has a gimmick, of course, but they also each have a special attack that you have to learn to defend against, or in my case, die and then get revived by Lumen. The bosses are genuinely very difficult, not in an unfair way, mind you, but in a very satisfying way. I didn't have the time to get good, but I did manage to figure out the gimmick of one boss on my own, which made me feel pretty cool. Gunvolt not only plays great, but it has such great art direction. The sprite work is excellent, some of the best you can find in this sort of post-GBA style. The environments feel high-tech, but varied in their atmosphere, which few games manage to pull off. And the music, it's also high energy, and a lot of the tracks have that classic melodic feel to them, focusing on saw waves, arpeggios, and varied motifs. For a game with a protagonist with electrical powers, the electronic instruments feel purposeful instead of a throwback for the sake of it. Gunvolt is one of the best platformers you can pick up in this style, and it bleeds style. As a contrast, here's here's a game with the complete opposite visual style that I still love to bits. Freakyforms Deluxe lives up to its name. These forms are freaky. I can't believe this game exists, not only because of how unique it is, but because it feels like it was made out of my own subconscious. It's got the wobbly appeal of Wobble Dogs mixed with a 2D side-scrolling RPG mixed with light monster tamer elements. It's so many things I like, all blended into a delicious, jiggly smoothie. Freakyforms Deluxe gives you your very own planet to customize and populate with the freaky forms, called formies. You start off simple, learning only the very basics of making a formie. I set out to make the perfect life form. I did misclick on the tutorial, so that's how I made Mistake, my son. Yeah, man. Mistake set out into the world to find his purpose. He never will, but he did eat berries and lay eggs, which is good because the eggs were full of money. Mistake drug his broken body across an empty landscape, and his creator commanded him to limp until he exhausted himself. After that, you get to make trees, decorate the land, and of course, make more formies. This is my favorite part of the game. I made Robin Jr., my adopted daughter, who looks exactly like me, except for the bird wings. Robin Jr. is my favorite child because moving around with wings is so much easier. Freakyforms focuses on creative traversal, and I think that it's at its best when you're using the unique traits of your formie to do tasks in ways you otherwise wouldn't have thought of. I made another child that has 8 arms, 4 eyes, and a halo that it breathes through. Also, Garfield's head is a car. By the time I recreated Charlie from Smiling Friends, I had gone full freak on the forms. My planet got bigger once I made 5 formies, and while exploring I found out this game has an entire dungeon section with auto battles that are influenced by what kind and how many limbs your formie has. Robin Jr. made it to the boss before dying, once again showing why she's my favorite child. There's a lot to do, but the real appeal of the game comes from the nuances of its systems. Depending on how many limbs your formie has, they'll move in a unique way. Legs pointing in the same direction don't like to cross, so they'll do a little shuffle instead. Wheels are well suited to slopes, but are bad at stairs. Arms can be used to walk, but it's more of a repeated tiny hop than anything else. I would have gotten even wilder with my limb combos, but I wanted to make each of my formies themed to something I found funny, so I ended up making a lot of them just have the typical 2 legs. I will say though, the sheer speed of Garfield car is unmatched. The whole customization aspect is definitely the selling point, and they do it really well. It's limited to 20 pieces, but you're able to change their width, height, rotation, and color, so you can pull off a lot with the limited number of options. There aren't a lot of variations for the limbs, but you can make them look pretty good if you get creative. There really is so much to the customization. I wish this game had been more popular. I want to spend hours scrolling through other people's custom formies. You can share them with a QR code, so it's really easy to download formies you find online. There's some multiplayer modes in the game too, like a minigame where you make a guy based on a theme and then see them all play around. No one wanted to play it with me though. They kept running away after I asked if they wanted to see my freaky form. This is one of those games where you either instantly love it or find it tedious and boring. Obviously I love it, but if you don't have fun making these little guys and watching them jiggle and make funny noises and die in cursed ways, then like 80% of the game's charm won't be there. Not every game is for everyone, but wow. This one is for me. I didn't know what to expect going into Dot Runner Complete Edition, but it definitely wasn't a cannibalistic protagonist who can canonically see the bottom screen. Dot Runner is focused on 2 things, solving puzzles fast and lore dumping the most out of left field take on the elixir of life I've seen in a game, which wasn't a very high bar until this game kicked it into the stratosphere. The first thing you need to know is that the top screen is only for cutscenes. Looking up there while you're running the maze is only gonna get you confused. You'll be navigating Bolt, that's this guy, through skillets, which are dungeons made of 5 mazes, each with a speedrun challenge at the end. For a puzzle game, Dot Runner is surprisingly fixated on movement. Remember that your inputs control Bolt from the top screen's perspective, so up on the D-pad will always move Bolt in the direction he's facing. You can move to his left or right with the shoulder buttons, and even drift by using the shoulder buttons while approaching the corner. It's pretty tough to get a handle on. More than a few of my deaths were because Bolt moved in a direction I didn't expect because of the controls. They're not offensively bad, but the divide between what's on screen and what you're doing is noticeable, and while it's always fun to see a game try to take advantage of the 2-screen gimmick, it feels clunky here. The level design itself is decent though, making you think at least a little bit about what order to collect dots. You can preview where dots will appear by entering one of these orange arrow areas, and then by facing the same direction, the dots will appear, giving you about 4 seconds to collect them all. There's a score chase aspect to this, encouraging you to chain together as many dots as possible. You can't just chase dots the whole time though. Enemies called the Yakiniku Corp will block the path forward, and you'll need either a power-up or a bigger party than them in order to eat them. And yes, you will be eating them. Bolt has canonically been locked in super space jail for his habit of eating people. The plot begins when Brisket, another pitmaster, summons him to lead the way to the land of eternal life. Roaster. Both the Pitmasters and the Yakiniku are approaching extinction, and so they're trying to reach Roaster to claim eternal life before the other. Running these mazes is the only way to free all the Pitmasters that Brisket needs to pull off her plan to unlock Roaster before the Yakiniku and their leader, Chop Suey, get there and finish off the Pitmasters for good. The sheer amount of wild swings this game's story takes is making my head spin. Why make all these characters and locations based off of barbecue? Why make this story about two civilizations on the brink of extinction eroding each other into nothing? Why make the main character Tron Cannibal Wario? To be clear, I'm not mad, I love it. The wild story and art direction makes this game so much more interesting to talk about and play, but I'm just baffled by the amount of lore packed into this tiny action puzzle game. I didn't even unlock the second story that takes place several thousand years before the first section. Most of the reason I want to keep playing is just to see where they take things. Another game with big story ambitions is The Adventures of Tintin, The Secret of the Unicorn, the game. I haven't seen this movie since it came out on Redbox, so the plot felt fresh to me. The game's biggest priority is translating the movie into game form, whether that's through making action sequences into levels or using the game models to reconstruct scenes in a layered slideshow. It even follows the movie beat for beat, albeit with a flash forward at the beginning. Tintin and Madoc are flying through a storm before crashing and narrowly escaping the plane before it explodes. This scene is way out of place chronologically, so it's a bit weird to have it at the beginning. I get wanting some action right off the bat for pacing, but these are special sections that control way different from the main game, so it just feels a little weird. After that little sequence, you get into the movie proper, running around this cute little town to discover your first clue on the treasure hunt. You beat some guys up, track down your missing miniature boat, and then break into some guy's house to find 2 other little boats. This is where the game starts proper. It's a 2.5D platformer. It looks and controls like those old rotoscoped games, you know, like Flashback. It makes sense because the movie is mocap, so I wouldn't be surprised if they took a similar approach, or at least directed the animation to be longer and naturalistic. Even with these more elaborate animations, the game controls well. It's not snappy, but it does feel responsive. Tintin's levels tend to not require much precision, with the main challenge coming from enemy encounters, which ramp up to be almost puzzle-like. You'll often be locked into a room with 4 or 5 guys and left to figure out how to pick them off one by one. My favorite technique is hitting them in the head with a vase, or hitting them in the head with a ball, or just body slamming them. Tintin can't do much on his own, but using the environment, there's a lot more options, including ones for taking out otherwise invincible enemies. I will say, while checkpoints are frequent, the levels are still ridiculously long. I think I spent 20 minutes on the first side-scroller area, and I didn't even find all the golden crabs. The whole game has a bit of a pacing issue in my opinion. The intro setting up varied gameplay to then lead into 20 minutes of side-scrolling, then cutscenes, then another 20 minutes on a ship. It's all about expectations. Like, why open with flying a plane and breaking down a door when afterward, all of the coolest things Tintin does is in cutscenes? Let me poke around a 3D model of the unicorn to find the scroll. Let me grappling hook swing along the side of the ship. I get that this is a movie tie-in game, so it can't go big all the time, but I think a shorter, more varied experience would make it a stronger representation of the movie, really letting you experience the world rather than sticking to a more traditional game format. That doesn't make what's here bad, but with tie-in games, I think that they're at their strongest when the game brings you to the world of the franchise and lets you interact with the characters, and I'm not sure if Tintin is fully getting there. If you're enjoying the video, I have a bunch of bonus episodes where I answer your questions and talk more in depth about the games exclusively on Patreon. You can see all the bonus episodes right now by clicking the link in the description. The first 100 patrons get access to an art book. After the first 100, it'll be gone, so if you want to see see that, I'd sign up before it's too late. If you've ever enjoyed the show, this is the best way to support making more. Moving on, this game released right at the beginning of the 3DS's life, and it bombed. People hated the way this game controlled, and I had no idea until I recommended it to a friend, and he told me it was one of those everyone agrees it's bad games. So here I am, ready to defend Dream Trigger 3D. Most of y'all probably don't remember this one, but it's a really unique take on arcade shooters and bullet hell games. The basic gimmick is this. You have to place blocks on the bottom screen. Those blocks explode, which reveal enemies on the top screen where you can shoot them. You refill ammo by hitting enemies with blocks, so it's a constant back and forth. Reveal, shoot, reveal, shoot. You have to be looking at both screens at the same time in order to play, and this does something to your brain. I struggled for the first 45 minutes to get past the first couple levels because I kept looking up and down Freddy Fazcam style, but then I started to see. Looking at both the top and bottom screen at the same time, playing fast and loose, swiping blocks while I moved at the same time to intercept the enemies I was about to reveal. Once this game clicks, it feels like you can see the future, but getting there is so frustrating. It feels wrong, like physically wrong to play a video game this way. Very few games even try something like this, and they're always polarizing. You either end up a Star Fox Zero or a The World Ends With You. I do have to hand it to Dream Trigger. They did something here super unique that is all their own, and they did it with one of the oldest game genres out there. And the presentation, it's just on another level. The adaptive music, the infinite techno geometry, the audio feedback you get from every action, and well, the 3D. Obviously, I can't show it off here, but wow, this game actually does it so well. A lot of 3DS games didn't have great 3D support. I mean, tons even turned it off altogether down the line. But this early on in the system, developers were really taking it seriously, and Dream Trigger definitely benefits. The extra depth helps separate your ship from the background, and the effect really starts to shine in the levels where you're moving through space. Instead of trying to pop out, the game goes in, and I've always found that to be more convincing. It's like peering into a little diorama. It makes the game feel that much more sensory and experiential, which is a ton of the appeal for me. Yeah, it's an arcade shooter, but all these little things add up to an experience that can feel transcendental. The only other games I can think of that give this sort of tone and experience are Rez and Tetris Effect, both of which ended up on VR. They're immersive, music-based games with similar vibes to Dream Trigger. I wouldn't be surprised if the devs took inspiration from Rez. The game designer also worked on Space Channel 5, so there's some overlapping waves making their way through history. I got sorta out there with the descriptions, but really, Dream Trigger feels like you're driving a car with only peripheral vision, and that alone makes it fun to experience, in the way that crashing into an embankment wall is. There are flaws. I don't love how the adaptive music was implemented. It feels very start and stop. The controls desperately need a move slowly button. Tons of bullet hell games have one, and the circle pad is just terrible at subtle inputs. Some of the menu design is convoluted. Moving around the world map has its own tutorial, and if you're not quick enough, the menu starts to spin, which is cool until I want to select something. Not perfect, but definitely unique, and I love it for that. Barbie, Groom, and Glam Pups. Oh, you'll find the exits are sealed. I'm sorry to interrupt you, chat, if you still even remember that name, but I'm afraid you've been misinformed. You're not here to receive anime girls, nor have you been called here by the games you assume. Although you have indeed been called into a labyrinth of barks and tricks, Barbies and puppies. It's very, very similar to Nintendogs, but the focus is moved away from having a pet and toward the more show dog world. That's the and Glam Pups. When you start the game, Barbie will guide you through all the features, helping you pick a puppy, groom it, dress it up, train it, and participate in a competition. Barbie did that to me in high school too. The customization is pretty good. There's plenty of cute accessories you can put on your pups, like collars, little clothes, and doggles. I'll say off the bat that none of this impacts the shows. You aren't competing with other dogs, it's just a mini game that gives you some money to spend on more accessories. Training your pup only serves to unlock more tricks, which eventually, according to legend, aka what Barbie told me, will lead to one unique trick per pup. I think if you're well trained, groomed, and dressed, you might get more money, maybe? Like, each pup has different meters that need to be maintained, and I imagine filling these helps with progression, but I can't emphasize enough there is very little strategy or even gameplay, which I think is actually a good thing. Like, it's Barbie, Groom, and Glam Pups, right? It's for little kids who love Barbie and want to play with puppies. And on those grounds, I totally get making the game a casual affair that lets you progress even if you do everything wrong. Games like this end up being more like a virtual toy than a game, in the sense that they emphasize self-directed fun. There's not a lot of systems, you're supposed to get enjoyment out of the act of customization and teaching tricks itself. These types of games can be really fun and engaging when done well, but I'm not sure if this game hits that balance. You get decent customization, sure, and there's 3 different competition types your pup can enter, but the runway and dance party modes are nearly identical. Your pup goes through a series of random tricks and you have to guide it with the right gestures to get more points. The photo shoot is similar, but a little different. Instead of performing tricks, your pup just kinda does stuff and you have to snap pictures at the right time. You'll notice that of the 3, only dance mode lets you actually pick what tricks your pup will perform, and none of these let you interact with your pups directly. What I'm getting at here is there's a lack of variety in how you play with the pups, and I think that's a real shame. Different kids have different modes of play, and I would have loved to see a photo shoot mode that lets you do more with the camera, or even just a free play mode where you can perform gestures to have your dogs do different tricks, just for fun. The other thing is that as a tie-in game, it does very little to really bring the feeling of Barbie into the game. It's very superficially Barbie, but there's a lack of deeper engagement with her and her world. At the very least, I think some unlockable outfits for Barbie herself would have aligned well with the toys and made some kids even happier. Is this a lot of critique for a Barbie game made to make a quick buck? Yeah, but if you're gonna do this type of game, I want to see it done well. This sort of genre isn't just for shovelware, it's a thriving set of games, especially now on Roblox. Oh, and since I don't have anywhere else to mention this, the sound mixing in this game is really bad. Someone made the decision to constantly have the puppy sniffing and barking in the background. It's just like having a real dog while trying to record. I appreciate that commitment to realism. So this next game. It shook the dust from the creaky hinges on a long-forgotten door to my heart. I felt things quickly and intensely, and I'd like to tell you why. So let's start with a story. In a desolate world being invaded by chaos, there are places of calm and shelter, oases that bring vibrance and joy to weary travelers and giving dwellers alike. You live in the oasis built by your family, your community, but it can't last. For no reason other than entropy, your home falls, and you flee into the desert. In this world ruled by decay, there lies the last water spirit. She cries out in her heart to find a way forward, out of this still water. You cry out in return to build what you once knew. You are each other's miracle. What you cannot do alone, you can do together. This isn't a romance, and it's not destiny. This is the threads of a good-natured soul weaving into something stronger, something bigger than what it is. I know I'm waxing poetic about the opening cutscene of a JRPG, but somehow this just got me. It's just the words I already had have been said. It's just a fantastic opening. Let's get into the game though, because there's a lot here. It's a JRPG centered around building your town by recruiting citizens by venturing out into the world to fulfill requests. I don't know what game did it first, but this is definitely a subgenre, because the same premise shows up in Ni no Kuni 2, Reverend Kingdom. However, Oasis structures itself loosely, allowing you breathing room to explore and to talk to people as soon as your own Oasis is founded. It's actually so free that I accidentally did half a dungeon I wasn't supposed to yet during the tutorial, and because of that I had plenty of items to give to my friends when I did eventually find the right cave and unbury the woman trapped inside. Did I die multiple times? Sure, but I got a lot better at the combat because of it. Combat is the half of the game that happens outside the Oasis, the conflict that balances the Oasis peace. Transitions between exploration and combat are seamless. An enemy just walks up and you have to either whack it with the sword or run. While combat can sometimes feel included just for the sake of tradition or genre expectation, it feels right at home in Ever Oasis. It makes sense for the story, and there's no weird disconnect of killing tons of wildlife or soldiers or whatever. Instead, you're literally beating the devil out of animals, and they'll go back to being normal snakes or jerboas once you get the chaos out of their system. It's a aligned with the themes of the game, but still gives you an excuse to feel that power scale, to have a direct mechanical extension that shows you're making progress, and one that feels good in the hands. That sort of kineticism is what makes real-time combat fun, and Ever Oasis understands it well. It delivers a very solid 3D action experience, and even mixes in some wind-based puzzle gimmicks into the dungeons, which I don't mind. Once you've completed a journey into the desert, you get to come back home to the Oasis. The game pulls a really neat trick here. It won't give you any XP until you come back, and you can't save while you're out in the desert. That gives each journey a certain tension, actively caring if you die because there's actual real consequence to it. But when you make it back to the Oasis, all that XP comes in, and you get so much stronger. It gives you that feeling of coming home after a long day of work, getting that sense of relief and release. The Oasis feels so much more like a safe haven because of this little mechanic. You run back through the gates and save as soon as you can. And since you're back in the Oasis, you might as well catch up with everyone. Tell them how your day was, and see if they need anything you might have picked up along the way. It's rewarding to keep up with your friends, not just for the emotions, but also in the game system itself, giving you rewards and new requests. You might even return with enough supplies to build a new shop or decoration, making the Oasis not just more useful to you, but to everyone. When a shop does well, the money goes back into the Oasis to build even more. Of course, you won't just see your old friends when you return from a trip, but new visitors might arrive while you're away. If you talk to them, you might be able to convince them to stay if you can find the right resource they need out in the desert. You can hear rumors too, little hints that guide you toward interesting places outside the Oasis. You can see the basic structure here, going out to get stuff to make your Oasis better, to make you stronger so that you can travel even further out. It's such a well-crafted loop, and what makes it even better is that all the mechanics align with the themes of the story. Little things like shops being built from a literal seed of friendship you literally grow with a new friend, or the happiness you feel coming home being expressed as leveling up. It all feeds into that central theme of building something hopeful and lovely, despite the world feeling so empty and chaotic. And the presentation, I mean, this is one of the best looking 3DS games. Viewed at its intended size, the chunky pixels paint such a well-blended image. The chibi models, the bespoke lighting, the stylized quirkiness of the plant life and enemies, it all feels so friendly and saturated. The sound design and music, each place not only feels full of life with footsteps and other ambient sounds, but each song in the game perfectly sets the mood. It can be catchy, but not distracting, perfect for just accenting all the great vibes already present. It's all expertly paired together, and it's all just so good, so moving, that I hope lots more people play this game because it's so lovely. Ever Oasis released just 3 months after the Switch, so no one talked about it, but now I am, and I hope other people do too. If you want to see one of the last games to ever release for the 3DS, or a JRPG so wild it was the last game its studio ever made, you should check this video out. See you later.